Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining the MIT Enterprise Forum of Washington and Baltimore. This afternoon, I'm Cynthia. I'm the Enterprise Forum's chair. For those of you that aren't familiar, MIT EFDC is open to everyone, and our goal is to empower people to create great businesses that leverage technology. So on behalf of the entire MIT EFDC board, thanks for joining us. I hope everyone's staying well and safe and cool during this very challenging time. This session on investor perspectives is part of our Back to Biz series of virtual events. Back to Biz is a series of engaging and interactive conversations examining how tech, entrepreneurship, and innovation can improve our lives during and will bring business back after this whole crisis has passed us. We wanted to offer a series of discussions that are unique to the most recent kind of pandemic fare and examine how technology, the investment landscape, the economy, and obviously the pandemic are affecting our lives. So we wanted to hear from the investment community about what's important to them now. I want to thank our panelist moderator, Kate Goodall. She's the co-founder and CEO of Halcyon. Halcyon is an innovative organization that supports the world's brightest social entrepreneurs and artists. They launched the Halcyon Incubator in 2014, which today is one of the world's premier incubators for social entrepreneurs. They also launched a venture fund and most recently launched Halcyon Angels in the DC region, gathering the leading angel investors investing in fast-growing impact startups. Kate also helped found We Capital in 2016, who's invested over $30 million in women-led companies. I also want to thank our entire panel who's joining us from various spots today. Katie Bilek is Senior Vice President at Republic Capital Access, the largest finance company dedicated to government contractors. She began her career at Goldman Sachs in equity sales and trading on the West Coast. She's also the co-founder of GovMates, an innovative teaming partner platform for government contractors. As a spouse of a veteran, she's passionate about small veterans business advocacy, and she serves on the board of the National Veteran Business Small Coalition. Katie is the recipient of the Smart CEO Banker of the Year and the Washington Business Journal Minority Business Leader Awards. She holds Series 7, 3, 63, and 65 licenses. Terry Shao is an entrepreneur, advisor, and investor with extensive experience in software, cloud, and fintech. He's founded multiple companies in mobile that were acquired by Sybase, Verifone, and most recently, Kalira, where he helped launch its recent public listing on the New York Stock Exchange in November 2019. Terry served on the board of Virginia CIT and is the current president of Montague DC, a nonprofit organization representing Asian American business leaders and entrepreneurs for over 25 years. I'm happy to say he also co-founded and serves as the executive director of the DC MIT Alum Angel Group. Jen O'Daniel is the investment director of CIT Gap Funds, where she leads seed and early stage investments in tech companies with a concentration on cybersecurity and enterprise software. A key member of the investment team, Jen has led over 50 investments in seed and early stage companies, as well as investments for Mach 37, a cybersecurity accelerator. She's a venture partner at NextGen Venture Partners and was a co-founder and managing director of VT Investor Network, a 75+ member angel group that invests in Hokie-led startups. So I'd like to turn this over to Kate. She's going to lead our discussion. We'll leave time for Q&A, and if you've got questions for our panel, please submit them through the Q&A panel that's located to the right of your video window. So I hope you enjoy the hour. And Kate, I'll let you take it from here. Thanks,
Thank you so much, Cynthia, and thank you, MIT Enterprise Forum. This is an honor and really looking forward to it. Hello again to my incredible panelists. I just wanted to start very quickly. We all just heard your legitimate bios, but I did ask you all to send me something that Google doesn't know about you, and wanted to just integrate that here in the beginning a little bit to get a bit more human as we begin. Katie, you have a first-degree black belt in Okinawan-style karate, which is amazing to me. And I guess I'm curious, how do the skills that you learned from doing that come to bear in your current role or life?
Well, thank you, Kate, for having me. Karate really taught me discipline and patience, which is obviously very important in the business setting, seeing transactions through to the finish. But in reality, I have two small children that I am constantly grappling with. So I would say dealing with kids, toddlers, is really where it comes into play.
Thank you. Terry, you sent me a really charming anecdote about how you joined, US high school and during high school and in your college days, you were the guy who could spin a pen or pencil on your fingers and really distracted the whole class by doing so. I want to ask you the same question. I don't know if it's as pertinent, or you can just demonstrate if you like.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So I came to the U.S. when I was age 15, attended high school, and it was really difficult to sort of break in to a new group. And I find a way to sort of build a little bit of personal brand, and that is by just showing people how I spin a pen or pencil on my fingers. I could do it forward, backward, and I could flip them. And I think sort of the gist of the story is you got to find something that's a little bit unique about yourself. And I was telling my son the other day, I said, what people don't know is every teenager in Taiwan, where I come from, do this every day. So I'm just a thing that kids on the other side of the globe does, and that actually makes me unique and I remember happens all the time. If I go into a new class, people come up to me after the class and wanted me to show them how I do it. So it's a great way to break ice and a great way to meet people.
I really identify with that. I'm a dime a dozen in England, but I also joined in high school and very quickly discovered that my accent made people think I was much smarter than I really am. And so I've hung on to that for the rest of my life.
Awesome.
Jen, I love yours. You are a muscle car enthusiast, and you not only currently drive a Dodge Challenger, a new Dodge Challenger, but you rebuilt a 1970 Dodge Challenger and have worked on dozens of 1970s cars. Is there anything that you find from that discipline and that expertise that you bring to bear in either your career or other ways?
I'm probably just a really good assistant in the building car thing, but that takes a lot of patience, and you have to get it exactly right to get an engine to rework again. So, I think that discipline, helps me work with companies a little bit better. Also, Terry, I demand to see your party trick next time we have coffee.
No problem.
Definitely. All right. Thanks, everyone, for helping me break the ice. I do want to remind, as Cynthia said, feel free to drop questions in the Q&A box. I will try to integrate them if they're immediately pertinent. Otherwise, we're definitely going to save time at the end to get to those. So jumping off, the world has changed a lot, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. Many economic projections right now are not looking so favorable. So I just wanted to start by hearing from all of you about how you're thinking about the next 6 to 12 months and if and how it's changing your investment strategy overall. Please feel free to kick it off, Terry.
Okay, yeah, sure. Obviously, it's a difficult time. If you look at it on a global basis, a lot of countries have done a better job of managing. The U.S., obviously, looking at the numbers, is lagging a little bit, and partially it's our unique challenges having different states, different decision makers in different areas. I think one thing that that's definitely true is a global economy. When it's bad here, it's bad everywhere because there's so much trade and so much. Even during the summers, Americans are known to travel extensively, and you can see that a lot of the even the UK. I was hearing a show on the radio said that the London Tower is having a real issue of keeping it open. I think it's really I think it's just survival mode at this point. You got to find a way to sustain the bad times, take a real portfolio approach, sort of rebalance or examine your portfolio of assets for investment decisions. It's really taking a portfolio approach to make sure that you're placing the risk in an area that you're comfortable with. Typically, I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. I've been an angel investor for about the last 12, 13 years. And I think, obviously some folks have higher tolerance of risk, or not necessarily just higher tolerance of risk, but more, I guess, a more capacity to take on risk in the early stage equity market. But in any case, I think just by taking a portfolio approach and placing the risk distributions, and keep a mindset of the first goal is survival, and then obviously making some decisions to pivot if necessary. For all these small earlier stage companies out there, I think the mindset is very similar. Is number one, find a path to survive. Number two, look at opportunities that this crisis would represent, whether it's by cutting costs or modifying a strategy, or getting into the different markets. And then number three is and take a long-term view and see what the goals and objectives are, and making sure that what you're doing right now is aligned.
Thank you. Jen, how is CIT thinking about the next 6 to 12 months, maybe differently than they were before, or not?
Yeah, so I'll step back and think about the last 4 months as well. So we've got a pretty large portfolio. We spent the first couple of months really just thinking about our portfolio, working with each of our portfolio companies to make a plan of action. Right, they had to cut cost to make sure they had enough runway, for the next 12 to 18 months. Make sure that they were applying for PPP. And getting those funds in. We're still seeing Series A transactions close. I had a company exit my deal, or at least announced the deal last week. Closes in a couple weeks probably. And we're still making investments. I think this is new for us in that we're going to be at a point where we're not meeting companies in person. We're not spending days at their offices meeting with all their employees, right? This is probably all our meetings are via Zoom. I think some industries have forever changed. I think we have to look at, some industries differently. Certainly, in education tech, us, 8 months ago, we're going to be looking at it very differently today, just because that market's completely changed. And we've seen, and we are seed stage investors. So we often co-invest with angel investors, and we've seen a lot of angel investors just allow, transactions canceled, because they're not sure, and they're investing their personal wealth instead of somebody else's money.
Yeah, definitely hold on to that point. Let's go back there. We'll talk about sort of the current landscape a bit more as well. But Katie, has this changed your investment strategy for the foreseeable future?
Sure. So I would just say, taking a step back, I'm a little bit different than the other two panelists.
Yep.
The type of financing that we provide is non-recourse, off-balance sheet financing. So it sits more senior in the cap structure. It's non-dilutive, and we are focused exclusively on U.S. government federal contractors. So given that backdrop, looking at federal spending, we view that as a constant, if not something that's going to be very strong going forward, right? So not to make light of the situation, but when COVID hit, we were inundated with demand from companies that were providing PPE to the government. I mean, you're also seeing commercial organizations step up with that demand as well. But what COVID did cause was kind of a hiatus in a lot of the active RFPs, a lot of the solicitations that were live. Deadlines were continually pushed to the right. And now we're coming up to the federal fiscal year end. And a lot of the spend that we would have started to see kind of in the late spring and early summer months are now being truly consolidated into August and September. So we are expecting to be incredibly busy over the next few months as the government looks to push out all of those dollars. I think by and large, you still have a lot of the same key themes that they're going on through the government, modernization spending being a huge priority for DoD. So we're actually very optimistic going forward at the amount of spending that we're going to see coming out of government.
Thank you. That's a good reminder that this landscape really does differ by sector and by stage, and I will rely on you to keep mentioning that difference and how it's perhaps you're looking at slightly different lens. So, you know, I think at Halcyon we've certainly found that companies have to be able to answer how they're pivoting at this current time and what their strategy is to get through this. It does make goal setting and reliable projections, I think, for many people very challenging. And then it also makes the ability for investors to evaluate those opportunities as a result and evaluate the risk of the current environment potentially more challenging. And I would love for each of you to kind of comment on a little bit on that. It sounds like, Kate, you might have a different answer there. But, you know, I'm wondering, I guess, if, you know, will it be enough in the future for a company to your point, Terry, have survived this as a mark of success, or do we still think that we're going to have expectations of growth in the same vein that we saw before they can get to the next round? Jen, I'm going to have you go first this time.
Yeah, I want to point out that you know, not all companies are, you know, just surviving or failing during COVID, right? There's a lot of companies that are thriving. A lot of cybersecurity companies are still thriving and getting even more customers. Companies that were doing, you know, virtual career fairs like Brazen. I imagine that business has grown because of this. But, you know, thinking of companies that, you know, are unsure about where their customers are coming from or what customers are going to happen. You know, we looked at things like cutting salaries, particularly on the management team, making sure that there's 12 months of runway. Obviously, PPP was important, but there was a lot of costs. Anyone that was, you know, imagine like a PR firm or a law firm, et cetera, asking them if they would, you know, cut their half, you know, during this challenging time to save scarce for these companies so they can thrive.
So for those that aren't sort of, you know, thriving, you're sort of looking for good crisis management as a signal, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I think good crisis management, you know, maybe a new plan. I mean, some people's customer base, you know, it just isn't going to come back now. Maybe their customer base was, you know, restaurants or, you know, maybe, you know, something to that effect. And so, but also, you know, also looking for pivots, right? You know, we saw, you know, Curbside Kitchen, for instance, you know, their whole premise in their business was that you're going to get food trucks coming to, you know, your corporate offices, to have your office building enjoy food trucks for the day. And, you know, that pivoted to providing meals for hospital workers, for, you know, communities, like a condo building community, that kind of thing. So the ability to pivot. But a lot of cost cutting is what was important going around.
Terry, can you speak to deals that you've evaluated post-March or things that you're seeing regarding sort of that ability to evaluate their growth or survival?
Terry's on.
Oh, sorry. Yes, there's definitely sectors that benefited from this this crisis a little bit. And if you think about, for example, any companies that are in the digital transformation sector, this pandemic have accelerated the digital transformation of online, offline, hybrid business models. I believe there's also other sectors, AI, machine learning, deep learning, that also would benefit as we see more automation, see more automation both on the service and product sectors. In a way, I don't think any of the fundamentals have changed. As investors, you continue to look for opportunities. And as it's often said, crises generally create the largest opportunity. So I think as investors, we continue to look at different companies that are raising money, and these days, seed stage companies are not slow. People continue to try to fulfill their dreams, and people continue to come up with insights and technological innovations to start companies. So we don't see that slowing down on the demand side. On the supply side, as you said, there's different type of investors certainly have to reassess their situations. Alum Angel Group, for example, we continue to hold pitch sessions. In fact, we have pivoted from regional pitch sessions to now national, because now you're virtual. You actually have a bigger base, over 1,000 members now that could sign on and watch these pitch sessions. So I think the opportunities don't stop, and we just have to sometimes do things a little differently. But companies are going to continue to raise capital. Companies are going to continue to grow, and the ones that find the right mix or the right product market fit are going to thrive, and those fundamentals won't change that much.
Thank you. Katie, in terms of the government contracting side of things and this slightly more macro picture, it sounds like you're expecting an abundance of opportunity rather than sort of greater risk evaluation strategy. Is there anything that's going to change about the metrics that you need to see?
Sure. I would say that what we have learned from COVID are that we have issues with the supply chain, right? So one of the things that we are a bit more focused on now is experience of the management team and making sure that they have done whatever it is that they do before. Also, we're looking a bit more closely at cap structure, looking at see what other pieces of capital, institutional usually, that are in the cap structure, to make sure that company can actually service the debt. Because during downturns, or especially with some of our clients that have a mix of commercial work that have taken a hit, we want to be able to make sure that they're able to service other loans that they may have on the balance sheet. Also, I'm glad that Jen brought up PPP. Government contractors have a very different outlook on life, in that their customer is the government, and many of them continue to bill through COVID. In the CARES Act, you actually had Section 3610 written exclusively for government contractors, which effectively allows them to bill for work maybe if they even aren't able to go to show up on site. So that is one of the things that we're monitoring very closely. If our clients or clients that we're bringing on board have taken PPP funds, knowing what their game plan is with that, if they intend to term that out or ask for forgiveness, mainly because that has implications should they eventually be audited and have to give that money back. Again, government contractors are in a very different spot as it pertains to PPP and those subsidies relative to the rest of the world. But I would say that is something that we're going to see a bit of increased scrutiny on, and depending on what the change in administration we might see later on this year, we're very interested to see what audits may come in 2021.
Thank you. I think that it's sort of a potentially a myth right now, or at least the prevailing theory, that venture funds and investors are doubling down on our existing investments rather than sort of looking to new ones. So basically sort of triaging their current portfolios. I know that's not the case with Halcyon. We're still actively pursuing great new deals as well. But perhaps you guys can comment on that and how it relates to your portfolio analysis. Katie, let's start with you.
Specifically pursuing new opportunities?
Yeah, from your lens.
So for us, we're actually looking at different geographies within the US. There's a lot of hotspots of innovation. Austin, we love seeing Army Futures Command there, and all the spend on really unique, innovative technologies. I would say Colorado Springs actually has a lot of great new businesses popping up, as well as kind of the Pacific Northwest. So ironically, we're focusing on other geographies when we finally can't actually travel to visit them. But I would say in looking at the vehicles that government customers can use to really gain access to non-traditional innovation, they can use CSOs, commercial solutions openings, or OTAs, other transaction authority, and in order to engage with a lot of these, by definition, non-traditional defense contractors that have really innovative tech. So breaking outside of our, DC Beltway Bandit Circle is where we're really finding exciting new opportunities.
Roughly what percentages would you say you're looking at geographically? Is it still sort of 90% DMV and then other, or just break that down just roughly?
We don't really discriminate by geography per se. I would say maybe 2/3 of our portfolio is the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. But where our outgoing focus is in actively seeking out new opportunities, I would say we're spending a fair amount of time in touching those other regions.
Somehow I just got muted. That's strange. All right. Terry, can you talk to me about what you're seeing in terms of, is there a doubling down on existing, or is there still an abundance for new investments?
Yeah, a couple observations. Like we said, we talked earlier about survival mode. I think a lot of these investors are having the same mindset. So their first instinct is to play defense and making sure that their portfolios all can survive and having their own playbook intact. The other thing that I think a point of observation is without traveling and without being able to see face to face, it's just going to take this quote unquote dating process between the investor and the entrepreneur a little bit longer. It's harder to build that trust without seeing all the body languages and it's not the same as sitting across the table as compared to this virtual format. And another observation is I think there's obviously a lot more tensions. There's US-China tensions and there's other geopolitical tensions. So I think it makes any of these international deals harder to happen.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And, there's so much excitement. We've seen what's happened to Zoom and DocuSign's share prices, and there's a lot, I think, that will change permanently and things that are great about this new virtual format, but there is something that goes missing. And I think it's a good reminder for people that are seeking investment right now to be maybe a little bit more patient than they might have been before. That's really, really a good point.
Absolutely.
Jen, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but perhaps you can expound. What are you seeing in terms of triage versus new?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we spent the first month or two, looking at our existing portfolio companies. Again, huge portfolio, so it took us a amount of time, and we sort of did what we could, but we were actively looking for new deals. We're making 20 new investments per year. And so we're spending a lot of time doing that. We invest only in Virginia-based companies. So probably 2/3 of that ends up being in Northern Virginia, and a third about that ends up being elsewhere in the Commonwealth. I think Terry made an important point. It's longer to close deals because you are, going to have to spend more time building trust when you're just meeting someone via Zoom. But also, I think it creates some new opportunities because investors have more time, right? They're not on airplanes, they're not traveling. And so they're more likely to take a meeting with you. So you might be able to start building a relationship earlier than you typically would with a VC.
Thank you. It brings up an interesting point that I'd love all of you to touch on just a little. How are you sourcing deals? How do people that are the right fit find you, or how do you find them? Feel free to, maybe Jen, we'll stay with you for a minute. Did you catch my question? Because it looked like maybe it blinked out. I was just asking how you're sourcing right now, or how people are finding you.
Is the question to me?
Yes.
Sure. So we're still sourcing deals in the same way, right? Or, the majority of our deals are coming from existing portfolio VC first thing to us. We get deals from trusted partners like law firms, and we also get deals from a stage or two ahead of us that see something interesting that they might want to invest in, and they pass to us. We have another fund that we invest out of that I'm sure I'll talk about later, called Virginia Founders Fund. We are, we enacted something new just as it started. Every other week we do a Zoom coffee with CIT and bring together about 100 entrepreneurs across the Commonwealth to either have a panel discussion or break out into smaller groups and sort of do a roundtable about your company. So we've been sourcing a lot of companies through that avenue.
Great. Katie?
I would say our source of deal flow has primarily remained the same as well. Most of our flow comes from bankers, both commercial bankers as well as investment bankers. Also private equity funds we stay in touch with regularly because they are often looking at acquisitions where we're a piece of the cap structure. And then kind of a separate route, we love following kind of like the innovation hubs in various federal communities like AFWorks, SoftWorks. I think Navy is doing a good job with NavalX, which they launched last year. And finally, the SBIR programs, which we follow to see if there's any new kind of emerging companies.
Great, thank you. And Terry, where do you find yours?
Yeah, I think sourcing has never really been an issue. I think I've been in the very active in the early stage ecosystem for the last 20 years, and what I've seen is because it's so much easier, the barriers are smaller to start companies nowadays. It's no longer a black box about VCs or term sheets. What I've seen is just that the number of deal flow, particularly in the early stage at the C stage, has consistently increased over the last 20 years. We gone through a couple of recessions at that time, and that hasn't really changed anything. In fact, if you look at some of these, larger size private companies, or even some recent public companies that have gone public, Uber, Airbnb, and so on, these companies all started in the last recession in 2008, 2009 timeframe. So I haven't seen any slowdown of entrepreneurs. Like I said, the people continue to have insights. The environment continues to be easier. The support systems, the resources, continue to be plentiful. With CIT and others, there's always a ecosystem that's more and more mature over time. So even though with the pandemic, I don't really see people have stopped creating. As we say, it's just going to take a little bit longer for them to get traction, perhaps. But the sourcing of deals isn't an issue. And now people even look more broadly instead of more locally. They can look at more regionally or nationally. Now that as we said, doesn't matter where you are; it's more of a Zoom call away.
Yeah. I think that's a good reminder. That's a good reminder for people looking for money that investors' inboxes are very full, and to be patient and make sure that you stand out for sure. Because it can be a lot to weed through. in Halcyon's experience, we obviously are always looking for great impact investments, and for a long time, impact was a bit of a dirty word, and now I'm starting to feel and see it mainstream a bit, and I surmise it's because because of the current moment and things leading up to this, a greater awareness of stakeholder capitalism, of equity, certainly climate change in terms of an impending crisis and an understanding of what crisis can feel like, maybe feels a bit more real. And so we're definitely seeing sort of a bit more seriousness around impact investing. I was just wondering if any of you are seeing the same thing, what you are seeing, if you're working with any impact investors as part of your rounds. Can you guys speak to that? Maybe let's go in reverse and start with Terry. Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I think over the past few years, the impact of these impact investments have definitely increased. One observation is, I think the definition, and Kate, let me know if I'm wrong about this, but I think the definition of impact, just like every company is wait, hold on. I want to hear what you just said. You broke up. You said impact, the definition of impact, and I'd love to hear what you said. Yeah, I what I've seen is the definition of impact investing or impact investments have expanded. Because impact investment used to be much limited to to social or some particular objectives, but now it feels like, for example, if you're creating a healthcare company, you can link that to impact investment. If you're creating a fintech company, you can link that to impact investment to make, for example, financial knowledge or access more accessible for the lower income tiers, whatever the case might be. So number one, I think the one observation is it seems like the sort of the definition and scope of impact investments have expanded over time. And then number two is just like what we're saying, every company is basically a technology company. You can almost say that too about every company has some social impacts if they look hard enough. But to your point, I think the real issue is could there be returns for that investment for the investors, and I think from that perspective, in my mind, this sort of the social impact type of investments has also transformed a little bit from the way when it started. It used to be like, okay, I'm investing because I'm interested to solve social issues, and I don't really care a lot about the returns. And I think nowadays it's more of a hybrid. It's like, look, yes, I want to be socially good. I want to create social impact, but at the same time, I got to create returns for the investors. Yeah, I think, you're right in that impact is in the eye of the beholder, right? And so we always think of it on a dial, right? And we're looking for those at the top of the dial, although, it can move up and down. And we're looking for people that measure and transparently report on that. At the same time, we're also, at Halcyon, we're also looking for those that are seeking profit, because you can't do good until you're doing well. And in my mind, there's no such thing as concessionary returns. You've got to be doing that, and you've got to be thinking about your investors. So I think in the impact world, I think we've maybe all gotten much more serious and professional about all of those things. I agree with you. And I think entrepreneurs are also more conscious of those things, perhaps, and wanting to build them in some way, because they realize it can give them a competitive advantage. I think particularly for these the millennial and Z generations that are coming, they want to see that, right? So, but yes, I'd love to hear, Katie, I don't know if this really sort of intersects with your world, but if you see that it does, I'd love to hear from you.
Sure. So I would say in the federal space, if you're looking at federal dollars spent, the government actually has a designated set asides for certain types of socioeconomic categories. So SDVOSB, the acronym for Service Disabled, Better Known Small Businesses. Hub zones, so historically underutilized business zones. 8As for minority-owned businesses and woman-owned small businesses. So the government tracks those dollars spent that are directed towards those types of small businesses, as well as small businesses in general. I think the bigger question is going to be, again, come this November, if there is a change in administration, if there's a change in those goals as far as federal dollars spent in any of those categories. Just taking a step back, I would say if you look at federal spending, small businesses in general are definitely a set-aside category and a group where I think you truly find innovation. Looking through the DoD lens, it's no knock on the Boeings and Raytheons, but if you're looking to find a really cool cutting-edge piece of technology, it's most likely going to come from a very small business in, say, Silicon Valley or Austin or Colorado Springs. So there is an emphasis on trying to identify those small businesses to bring in that cool technology, which the government would consider them. I would say that's probably impact from the government's perspective. I would also turn it on its head and say, as a small business looking at access to capital, is where is that capital coming from? And so the DoD, under Ellen Moore, they currently have a platform called the Trusted Capital Marketplace. And so given what's going on with the supply chain, this is essentially their effort to identify funds that are, solely US-based investors investing in US businesses. So I think you're seeing that coming from the flip side, where the ultimate buyer, the federal government, is now kind of pushing out and looking to see where are those capital providers that can provide that quote unquote trusted capital.
Thank you. That's a really interesting perspective in terms of the more macro end and equities end of the market. Jen, are you co-investing with any impact investors? What are you seeing?
So about 3 years ago, my team and I just sort of wondered out loud, were the reasons that the VC dollars seen put into women-founded and minority-founded businesses because that there wasn't any angel capital available to them at the earlier stages. And so we created Virginia Founders Fund to sort of address that, for a few different groups, one being geography, and then one being some demographics. And we thought that these groups uniquely tied together in that, as we think about angel investing, we often think that angel investors typically will invest in someone that reminds them of themselves. And so, we thought that was probably harder in Southwest Virginia. That was probably harder as a woman founder. That was probably harder as a Black founder. And so we set aside returns from investments to take earlier bets in earlier stage companies than we typically would, to see if we could get other angel investors to also put capital on the companies at that stage, or we would just go alone and see if we could grow it enough so that we could help the company show traction to attract investors. We've made 25 of those investments, and as we think we might double the number we're doing per year this year.
And how is that portfolio performing, or is it too early to tell? Because I know they're early stage.
Yeah, it's a little bit too early. Have moved on to go to our next sort of level of funding, our main fund. But they're too early to tell, right? I mean, to work on small amounts. You're talking about stage companies. So far they're all doing really well, and it's brought some interesting point of views to our portfolio.
Great. I'm going to hop over to the Q&A box here. Just pull in one and maybe another here. There's one of the earlier ones that says, with the seemingly higher probability of a Biden presidency, which we're not going to debate on this panel, I'm not even going to go there, but it says his tax plan doubles capital gains tax, and what impact do you see on the M&A market in general? I think, interpreting that question in terms of sort of, if we have a more bullish president on taxes, certainly what impact do you see that having? Katie, I think this is one for you to start.
I think, interestingly, during COVID, we've still seen transactions being closed, right? A lot of them are, at least from my lens of looking from the federal contracting landscape, a lot of them have been focused on kind of highly technical niche types of products or services. You're not seeing kind of the plain vanilla program management or acquisition support types of companies being bought up right now. They're more focused on, say, microelectronics or spectrum, or autonomous systems, as an example. I think as we approach the election, yeah, I think a lot of those transactions are just coming to a standstill, right? Until they see who actually comes into office. But I think a Biden presidency, I think he's still relatively more centrist and less far left than maybe some of the other previous candidates that have been talked about. So I think it is still an issue in the business community that a lot of people are watching very closely. If anything, maybe depending on how close we get to November, if it's very likely, then yes, we might see some of those deals sneak in 2020 as opposed to waiting to 2021.
That's interesting. Terry, Jen, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, staying away from the politics, just focusing on focusing on economics alone. I think you know, if we do double capital gain tax, I think it will have significant impacts on the investment world, anywhere from from angels to all the way to private equity. Yeah, so I think on the MMA side, I do think MMA is likely to increase. Because as the market shifts, it generally will make more sense for the assets to sort of to be reallocated and managed differently. So I do think MMA would pick up as we move into the next 6 to 12 months.
Thank you. Jen, I'm going to skip you just for the minute, but I'm coming to you first next, because I want to try and get all of these questions in. We're losing time. One from Mark that I think you might have one of these up your sleeve, Jen. Any favorite stories of startups that you've worked with that have benefited from the pandemic?
Benefited from the pandemic. We've got a company in our portfolio that provides basically online career fairs. So the ability to take your entire career fair and put it online with virtual space and capabilities for interviews, that's never been more relevant than it is today. Well, I don't know the numbers and wouldn't disclose them. I would just take a guess that just quadrupling in business easily.
Terry or Katie?
Yeah, so a company, GoTab, GOTAB, and what they do is they provide QR code based access to enable enable remote ordering and fulfillment of food delivery, and that's their business. I think I heard have gone up 40x.
Wow.
So yes, definitely. There's definitely some changes in some changes in the market, and those that then capture those opportunities are going to benefit.
Katie, we've heard your whole world is relatively bright, but is there a specific story that comes to mind?
Sure. So I can say on a personal level, so I, aside from the hat that I wear at Republic, I co-founded a business called GovMates, which is a teaming partner platform for government contractors. We joke about it being like Match.com for GovCon, but we can't really say that because we would get sued. But essentially what we do is we facilitate at conferences mass scale matchmaking sessions, kind of like the business speed dating sessions. And obviously with all the conferences having disappeared or going virtual, we actually have a platform that operates over Microsoft Teams or Zoom, depending on the preference, to be able to facilitate hundreds of one-on-one sessions virtually. So we've seen a lot of demand actually from government customers for that platform, given that their physical in-conferences have evaporated.
I'll share one just very early stage company that's at Halcyon right now called Flickshop that works to provide communications in the prison system, because obviously people don't have phones. So they make it very easy for you to just text a message and it converts into a physical postcard, and that goes into and is received by an inmate. Obviously during COVID, prisons responded differently depending on where they were, but for the most part the trend was to shut down visitation or limit it extremely. So he saw his business really take off, and I think has been smart about using that increase to also consider different industries that he can deploy this solution to. Let's see, we're at 12:50. We have one more question here in the side in terms of what are your views on B Corp investments. I actually, it's funny, being sort of someone who considers herself very much an impact investor, don't love them. I will tell you that I think that they prematurely restrict people because there's just so many qualifiers that people have to make, rather than just growing a great company that has a genuine desire for impact. But I don't know how the rest of you feel. Feel free to jump in. Any views on B Corps?
I would just say that an investor, the stage of companies we're investing in, I don't think at that point you really know who you are going to be as a company, and you're probably have got a pivot or two ahead of you. So I just think it's too early to make that kind of decision, because again, it is restrictive, as you said.
Yeah, I've never come across a B Corp.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure I have either, and I think that might be why. All right, great. I don't see any more live questions, but I do have a really good one maybe to wrap us up, which is, as you look to the future, what's exciting to you? Katie, let's start with you.
I would say 5G and what it's going to offer us, both on the civilian side and commercial world, as well as for DoD's approach to connectivity. I think where we stand as the U.S., given the evolving geopolitical landscape, I think it's very important that we cement our place in that landscape. So I'm curious to see which players, which partnerships through industry and academia pop up to really kind of help us in the 5G path forward.
Jen, what about you?
I still, think that really one of the largest problems we face as a country is securing our critical infrastructure. I think we don't talk about it enough. I don't think we think about it enough. And so what excites me, I'm always really interested in, is a cybersecurity company that's trying to solve that problem, right? It only takes, water supply and all the data rooms in Ashburn, which takes down the internet, which takes down our banks. So I think it's just a problem we're not spending enough time on.
Terry?
Yeah, a couple areas. One would be, I think to reduce global warming. I think the zero emission micromobility. Given coming out of the pandemic, how are we as a nation, as a society, will change how how transportation or how city transportation would be in the future, and how we could make micromobility a lot more efficient with the mix of kick scooters, e-bikes, mopeds, and mini cars and things of that nature, and then using that to complement public transportation. And to make, and also place into the smart city, smart IoTs. The second area, and this probably most people will believe, is in the advancements of AI, machine learning, and deep learning. Given sort of, the way I look at it is, given that we don't really have a lot of killer apps right now. This feels like the internet in 1995, where we know it's going to change the way we live, and it's going to change how technology would advance. But we don't actually have a whole lot of good applications or use cases that could leverage right now. So I think it would definitely have a lot of winners coming up in the next 3-5 years who can figure out what those things might be. So those two areas I think that's been pretty exciting for me.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to be in 25 and looking back at this moment. I would share your the subject that you mentioned, Terry, in terms of climate change, just from the point of view of thinking about the fact that as silver linings go, the COVID crisis at the very least has been a shared crisis globally, and everyone, no matter where you are, who you are, what age group you are, what gender you are, everyone is experiencing this. And while certainly people are having different experiences based on their socioeconomic class or what country they're in, it's going to be a cultural and economic relevant touchstone for all of us as we proceed forward as a human race, and hopefully as we are able to maybe leverage that to build the relationships that we need to tackle such an enormous problem as climate change. So I think that there are silver linings to be found despite the challenge and stress of this current moment in the pandemic. Great. I am going to hand back to Cynthia. Cynthia, I think I'm just 1 minute over. Thank you for being generous with us.
Oh, you guys were great. As a matter of fact, I'm going to echo one of the questions, the comments that came into the Q&A. It basically said, Kate is a brilliant moderator, so thank you so much for this. Hey, I want to thank everybody on our panel, not just Kate, but Katie, Terry, Jen, and thanks to all of you for joining us. You can find more information on our website and a copy of this event on our website, mitefdc.org. Unfortunately, our live stream didn't go off today, but we will be posting the video of this very shortly after this event. We have several other events lined up for the coming months, including discussions, including the future of energy, a session on air mobility technologies, and we're doing a CEO pitch and business challenge. So any of you that are attending today that might be interested in that, please reach out. And I'll also mention on September 4th, we're working with our friends at SAE International, sponsoring their annual golf tournament. If you're a golfer, please check our website and email for more information, including a chance to win a slot to play. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you, particularly our panel, for joining us. I hope all of you have a great rest of the week. Stay cool, and we look forward to seeing you again.